Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
I'm David Knight with Joe Biggs, and today we've had another Tesla fatal crash. Now, this one happened near Amsterdam. This was a death by fire, but they say a crash was involved, and of course it brings up the question as to whether or not Autopilot is involved. Tesla is saying there is no Autopilot involved in this crash, Joe, but they said that about the other fatal crash, which, by the way, they didn't make it public for a couple of months. It was more than 60 days they kept that private, and they were very active in the stock market. They now have a lawsuit, multi-million-dollar lawsuit from a stockholder against them. They're being investigated by the SEC, not just the transportation boards, okay? They're being investigated by the SEC, saying that they kept that quiet, that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration also worked with them to keep it secret. We'll call that NHTSA. That's how we'll refer to them from here on out. But of course, this is a large number of aspects to this. There's the electric battery aspect of it, there's the autopilot aspect of it, and there's the crony capital aspect of it that we have involved here. But the first thing that both of us look at when we see this is Michael Hastings, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we saw what happened with Michael Hastings. I mean, the way he was driving that night was completely and totally out of the ordinary. This vehicle was speeding down the road. You see it flash, then flash again, explode, and here you are, the front of the car is completely demolished, burnt. Only the back end pretty much left intact, just like what we saw outside of the Netherlands. This man died with his Autopilot electric car collided when it hit a tree and burst into flames. The firefighters took hours to remove the body from the Tesla over fears they could be electrocuted, like you said. So you've got this autopilot fear, and you've got this electronic fear of being electrocuted, so forth and so on.
And before we get away from Michael Hastings, again, when we said that, everybody said, oh, you're conspiracy theorists.
Exactly.
Nobody could take over his car and make it go really fast. Nobody could blow his car up, and yet the engine was ejected down the road, not captured. It was a frontal collision into some trees, which would have pushed the engine into the car, and yet the engine flew 100 feet or whatever it was down the highway in the direction that he was going. His car went in there, and there was no involvement in the fuel tank in the back, and he had told people that he was concerned that his car was going to be hacked. Everybody said he drove like a granny.
Yes, I mean, days prior, they saw him looking under his car. His neighbor even confirmed that she had seen him looking under the car, and at one time, Michael had even asked if he could borrow her car to run some errands in. So there was definitely some concern. You know, the more electronic we go with these vehicles, there's more of a chance that something like this is going to happen, whether it be hacking or something like that. So that's definitely a cause for concern, something that buyers need to look into.
And that is a real concern, because we've had now 2 years in a row, we've had hackers at the Black Hat Conference go in and show how they can take over a car, they can speed it up, they can take over the steering, they can take over the brakes, they can do all the stuff that we said, hey, they're doing it. And of course, Richard Clark said at the time, yeah, that can be done. He said that a little bit after that, and then after that we found out that there was real motivation for people in the government to stop Michael Hastings. So that's one aspect of it, is the hacking, the maliciousness of it. But let's talk about the subsystems and the other things that are concerned about this. Earlier in the week, we had an article on Infowars.com from Kit Daniels, and it was a quote from the National Traffic Safety Board chief, who said fully autonomous cars are very unlikely. He was speaking at MIT, and he says, I'm not confident that we will ever reach the point of fully autonomous cars. I don't see the ideal of complete automation coming anytime soon. Some people just like to drive. Some people don't trust the automation, so they're not going to want to drive. He said there's no software designer in the world that is ever going to be smart enough to anticipate all the potential circumstances that software is going to encounter. That's the issue. As an engineer, as a software designer, I understand that all they're doing is they're pushing human error. They say, we're going to eliminate deaths on the highway. We're going to eliminate human error. No, what they're going to do is move human error to another level. They're going to give government control over your movements to control and track you, and that's the true issue. And if they're going to have autopilot, as a matter of fact, Tesla has stopped calling it autopilot. They're moving that back. They're getting away from that term. They said in this accident today that autopilot was not involved, but they said that for over a month. After it finally became public, 2 months after it happened, they said autopilot was not involved. When the National when NHTSA did their investigation, they found that it was involved. And so then Tesla came back and said, well, it was the brakes that failed, not the autopilot software. So again, it keeps going around. But let's talk about this other aspect, and that is the danger of the batteries. Because just as we've seen laptops catch fire, just as we've seen cell phones catch fire, we've had situations in the past where Nissan Leafs have caught fire and burned entire houses down as they were charging. And just back in the middle of August, not in Amsterdam, not in the Netherlands, but in France, somebody was taking a test drive in a Tesla in France. And what happened, they say the vehicle supposedly made a loud noise, sent a warning on the dashboard. There was a problem with the charging. There was an employee in the car with the person taking the test drive, said, pull this over. They got out very quickly, and the car instantly caught fire. Before the fire department could get there, there was absolutely nothing left. It was incinerated. So that's another aspect of it. So you not only have the Autopilot software, you also have the electric battery itself that's a danger.
Well, Mobileye is a company that supplies the equipment for Tesla's Autopilot, and they said that they're not going to be working with Tesla in the future based off of these accidents that are starting to occur time and time again. So like you said, these guys are going to kind of pull back and say, you know what, this is going to be a huge issue for us. We don't want any part of this.
I think what we're seeing in these multiple accidents is an attitude from Tesla that we have seen for a long time from Silicon Valley. And that is they're going to put stuff out there. In many cases, they'll put software that really isn't adequately tested. And they'll let people give them feedback. And that's how they'll do the beta testing on this. That's fine if you're working with a situation where all that's going to happen is you're going to lose some data when it crashes. But you're inside this thing, and when it crashes, you crash and die with it. That kind of attitude does not work. And when you turn on the Autopilot, you click and say, I understand that this is this is a beta test or whatever, except that the people around you haven't signed on to that beta test. I didn't sign on to the beta test with this. And you look at this other recent crash that happened, was it a couple of weeks ago here in Texas? This was a man who had his Autopilot on, Mark Mulfan. And he said that he had done this route before. He was trusting Autopilot. He reached into his glove compartment to get something, and it struck a guardrail, and it did it multiple times, okay? He said it actually sped up after the first crash. And this is what he said. He said, it gives you a false sense of security. I'm not ready to be a test pilot. It missed the curve. It drove straight into the guardrail. The car didn't stop. It actually continued to accelerate after the first impact on the guardrail.
I mean, one of the interesting things, too, to think about, though, is what if you're behind on child support, or what if all of a sudden there's a warrant that comes down for your arrest? The government is the one that's building this software. These are the people that are going to have control of the back doors of these things. And that's what's dangerous about these electronic cars. The fact that these guys can go in, find your vehicle, they can track your movements, shut you down. If they don't like what you're saying, drive you off a cliff. So it's definitely something that people... We've
already had the government come in and say, hey, if you're behind in your taxes, you're not going to get out of the country.
Exactly.
Right? They're going to say, if you're behind in payments to the IRS or what, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be under house arrest, essentially. And that's what is so dangerous about it. And that, Joe, is why I believe the government is working so hard to make this happen.
Yes.
They want to work with the corporations because it gives them control over your movements, to be able to track you, to be able to tax you with all of your movements, and to be able to shut your movements completely down. That's one of the reasons why Tesla is involved, as others have pointed out, as Eric Peter called him, the crony capitalist king, okay?
Yeah.
Elon Musk has gotten almost $5 billion in subsidies as a crony capitalist. And one of the things that he gets are CARB credits, the California Air Resources Board, okay? They give these zero-emission vehicle credits. Now, that is something that is a California program, but what they do is they add fees to regular cars when you buy those, and then they give those subsidies to Elon Musk. And he's very angry recently, demanding that those be raised. He wants more of a subsidy. What it amounts to is not only crony capitalism, but we're now seeing the first carbon taxes and carbon exchanges and that sort of thing. That really is what this amounts to. And this is the way it's going to break down. It's going to break down favoring some billionaires at the expense of the rest of us, saying that we're going to do this because these vehicles are electric. And again, we've seen now 2 fires, most likely due to them being electric. And he said back in December, he and his executive, one of the executive officers of his company, that when the scandal broke with Volkswagen, they should be forced to make electric vehicles and banned from making diesel vehicles, even though diesels don't have any emissions the way that they're building them in Europe now. Well, we're going to have more reports as this develops. I'm sure there's going to be more incidents with this, and I'm sure that there's no truth to the rumor that the car was heard shouting "Autocar Akbar" as it drove into the tree. For Infowars.com, I'm David Knight with Joe Biggs.
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139.